Good evening and welcome to the Planning and Zoning Commission for the City of Cedar Falls for July 28th, 2021. We are online tonight, I think for the last time, right? And you can also join by phone. You can view Channel 15 and many other varieties you can see on the website. So with that, we're going to call the meeting to order and roll call vote.
Yeah, Hartley, Holst,
Here.
Larson,
Here.
Leeper,
Here.
Lynch, Prideaux,
Here.
Saul,
Here.
Schrod,
Here.
Sears.
Here.
All right, we would seem to have a quorum. Thank you, Karen. With that, we'll have minutes for June 23rd, 2021. I would entertain a motion to approve.
I move to approve. I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the minutes are put in form. Let's see, public comments. Are there any items not on the agenda tonight that anyone from the public would like to speak toward?
There's none in Zoom.
Okay, none in Zoom, nobody in the room. With that, we'll move to old business. And the first item on the agenda is a land use map amendment from medium density residential to community commercial, from A1 to commercial C2 district and S1 shopping district to PC2 for the south side of West First Street. And Tom, I think you're going to kick this off.
I am. This was a discussion item at your meeting on June 23rd. The location is on West 3rd Street. You'll see here the properties involved are outlined. We have three different zone parcels. The westernmost portion is about 5 acres, and the request is to rezone it from A1 to PC2. The middle, there's approximately 2 acres going from C2 to PC2. And then the eastern portion, about 20 acres, is currently zoned shopping center or S1, and the request is to go to the PC2. Just as a reminder, the PC2 is a planned district, and it's intended to really look at the big picture and how to comprehensively plan the development, complement the surrounding community. It's the purpose of these regulations to encourage a high standard of building architecture and site planning, which will foster commercial development that maximizes pedestrian comfort, convenience, and pleasure. Part of this request that we discussed is the fact that the eastern portion you'll see highlighted in orange is currently medium density residential, and so if this zoning goes forward, the land use should be updated to the community commercial. To look at, I'm going to go through the updated parts of the staff report, and you'll see those highlighted. These are the proposed uses for the development. There's generally, it looks like 11, we're a little off on number, uses, but we have some concerns with the property outlined in yellow to the west side. These uses are a little more intensive. The applicant has proposed to mitigate with a 30-foot buffer along the western property line, but there are no details on what would be established to create the buffer. The commission should consider if the buffer screening would be adequate between the commercial uses and the planned unit residential to the west, or whether these sites should be reserved for less intensive commercial uses. And again, we'll kind of address the land use plan as we get further into the presentation, but I wanted to point out that the location of those two are a little more intensive with the gas station convenience store, which could be a 24-hour operation next to residential property. And then the architectural design standards have a vision for rural, based on a rural heritage. The applicant has provided a couple of renderings, and we had those last month of the larger 2 buildings, the medical building and the retail area. But as you look at along the second image, the buildings along Whitetail Drive will also have visibility from West First Street. There should be some consideration given to the aesthetics, street aesthetics, and the architectural design of these buildings, and I'll go into a little more detail further along. Some of the issues have to deal with the building siting. The Thunder Ridge Development Guideline states that buildings on corner lots will be placed to the corner setbacks and parking encouraged to the rear, and the landscape and development phasing plans contain a note stating building entrances shall have pedestrian access to sidewalks. But the plan does not illustrate how this will be achieved. And I have provided some updated guidelines that they have provided since the last meeting. And rather, it illustrates the buildings located generally in the center of the lot, surrounded by parking areas with no pedestrian connections to the sidewalk. There is a conflict between what is shown on the plan and what is stated in the development guidelines. Staff recommends that the applicant amend their master site plan so that it reflects what is stated in the design guidelines. The master site plan should be revised to address the issue of pedestrians having to mix with cars in the parking lot in a manner that is consistent with the stated development guidelines, or they could delete the images of the buildings and footprints in the parking lot layouts from each of the lots and reference the guidelines for building and parking lot placement. So they could just take these buildings off and then in their design guidelines discuss how these will be addressed, so that there's no conflict between what is in their design guidelines and what's actually on the plans. And again, we had talked about part of the issue with these not matching is that this is a long-term build out likely, and that the people that review this now may not be here in the future. So if there's ambiguity, then there becomes an issue. Since the last meeting, the applicant has updated their development plan showing sidewalks along First Street. That was a discussion we had. All the current plans have been updated with the exception of the land use plan, which was developed by a different entity, and they will have that updated if this goes forward. Excuse me. As far as the access to the RP property, they have proposed two locations, one to the north and one to a little further to the south. These are both outlined in black. The current RP plan has their approved entrance down at the very south end of the RP property and of this development. Staff would recommend that the entrance be a continuation of Whitetail Drive, but the alternative location would be acceptable. However, the RP plan would have to be amended because currently the RP plan shows buildings in the location where that street would extend through there. The dedication of the necessary right-of-way will be required with platting, so when either of those accesses or the platting happens, there'll need to be a dedication of that right-of-way. At least two means of access will be required for this area. Staff notes that the IDOT has not approved any direct access to First Street for the RP area, so a thoughtful access between these two properties will need to be addressed at the time of platting. As far as wetlands, prior to any development activity in this area, a definitive wetland mitigation plan will be required, and appropriate approvals will be received by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. As you can see, there's to relocate the sewer and the water line on the south end of the property into the Lake Ridge Drive right-of-way. They will need to actually get into the wetlands, so that needs to be mitigated before they'll be able to do that relocation. Another issue with the platting is that the extension of Lake Ridge Drive is actually, and it's outlined in yellow, on the RP property, so this will have to be platted as part of the Thunder Ridge development so that that right-of-way is available. And then another issue is the phasing plan. The staff acknowledges a desire to develop the site in more than one phase because of the infrastructure. However, with so little development in the second phase, so the first phase is in yellow, the second phase is in green, and there's just two lots associated with that part of the development. Staff finds that there'll be little incentive to extend Lake Ridge Drive to the south. and recommends that Lot 7 be, the medical office building, be moved to Phase 2, creating a little more incentive to get the future street connection. Some technical comments, details for the wetland mitigation approved by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers securing the land for the extension of Lake Ridge Drive from the RP property, and an IDOT approval for the access to the state highway will all be required prior to any development activity on site. The development phasing plan does not meet the subdivision requirement to ensure timely connections of critical infrastructure. In this case, the extension of Lake Ridge Drive, staff does not recommend approval until a phasing plan is amended to provide more certainty that this critical street extension will be made. And I have provided just a diagram showing the current property. There was some discussion about the missing piece of Lake Ridge Drive, and if you look down at the south end in red, that's on the Clark property. That's about 350 feet. If this extension doesn't get built, then there's no ability in the future to put a street across that Thunder Ridge development. So it's important that this piece of infrastructure is considered in the phasing plan and gets extended to the south property line. There are significant inconsistencies with various documents submitted by the applicant that need to be addressed. Example, the design guidelines do not match the master site plan. The building and parking placement and the lack of pedestrian connections are not consistent with the design guidelines or with the intent of the PC zoning district. A consistent set of plans is necessary to ensure that this development can proceed to the next phase. Since the last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, the applicant has provided an updated phasing and landscape plan and an updated rezoning plan showing sidewalks along West First Street. Again, they have indicated that the land use plan created by Emergent Architect will also be updated to reflect those sidewalks. Staff recommends that Emergent update the plan to match the design guidelines or simply remove the building and parking lot layouts from the plan to make it clear that the design guidelines must be followed when individual sites are developed. If the submitted master plan and development guidelines conflict, it's unclear how the sites should be developed. Again, that was that conflict off into the future. The documents must be cleaned up to be internally consistent prior to approval. One of the ways to address the internal inconsistency of the documents and also address the Commission's concern regarding the speculative nature of the proposal, staff recommends that the applicant remove the labels of very specific uses and instead identify general land uses that might occur on each lot. For example, instead of a credit union fast food restaurant, they could label the lots for more general categories such as categories of uses, such as retail and service uses, office, financial institution, restaurant, and similar. This would avoid locking specific uses into individual lots and allow more flexibility to respond to the market. That being said, staff has concerns with the convenience store gas station and the full-service restaurants located next to the RP zone property. Both of the proposed uses typically have hours of operations which extend into the evening, and in the case of a convenience gas station, it may operate 24 hours. The extended hours of operation will also extend traffic, noise, lighting, which may conflict with the residential enjoyment. Denoting lower intensity of uses for these lots, such as office or financial institution, is recommended or indicated in the development guidelines, that the hours of operation for any development on these lots will be limited to daylight hours. Exterior lighting will carefully be designed to prevent glare and spillover light, and enhanced landscape buffering will be required between the commercial and residential uses to the west. As with any major development, there is a considerable amount of infrastructure that must be installed. The phasing plan should be established to ensure that all critical infrastructure is installed. In this case, the proposed phasing should be established in a manner that will ensure that the critical extension of Lake Ridge Drive is completed to the south boundary of the site. With so little development proposed in the second phase, there will be little incentive to construct the remainder of Lake Ridge Drive. To avoid similar mistakes that have been made in the past, the city recently amended the subdivision code to ensure that these issues are forefront when new development is proposed. Now is the time to address this issue. Staff recommends the phasing plan be amended to more evenly divide the development in the two phases so that there is incentive to develop the second phase and extend the street to the south boundary of the site. Alternately, the entirety of Lake Ridge Drive extension should be installed in the first phase of the development. And since the last meeting, the applicant has amended the design guidelines to state buildings should be placed at front setbacks with parking encouraged to the rear. But it goes on to state the final building location will be determined during the site planning process. This is rather ambiguous statement that does not provide a clear direction on the site design. This ambiguity combined with conflicting master plan documents show buildings surrounded by parking but provides no real direction for future developers, city staff, the Planning and Zoning Commission, or City Council. In addition, the guidelines should address the design of the facades that face West First Street to ensure that they include quality building materials and design elements that address views from First Street, which is a major gateway into the community. For example, loading docks, service entrances, and unfinished or blank building walls should be avoided. Dumpster areas should be carefully placed and screened from public view. We recognize that development is important, and we certainly, this is an example of a plan that has good uses that would complement, but the issue is really that the planning documents, the design guidelines, and then that critical piece of infrastructure have not fully been addressed. So staff recommends denial of the request for the PC2 district unless the critical issues are addressed.
All right, thank you, Tom. Is there anyone from the applicant that would like to speak to the item? Name and address, please.
Wendell Lipkus, VJ Engineering, 1501 Technology Parkway, Cedar Falls, representing Me Associates. I guess I'm going to start with, quite frankly, I'm very disappointed in the staff report. We had a pretty good discussion here, well, I guess almost a month ago now, and I provided staff with additional information, especially regarding the Lakeview Lake Ridge extension. I think I mentioned last time that since 1974, there was an agreement in place with the city and the developer at that time, which has carried through to his successors and assigns, that they would have 40 feet of right-of-way whenever they deemed necessary that Lake Ridge would go in. And they waived any right of assessment. In 1994, the RP plan was approved by the city council with that same stipulation. So there was 40 feet on the RP side. So since 1994, the city has had rights to an 80-foot strip of land all the way down to the Clark property with waived objections to any assessment. So going back again and again to the fact that we have to leverage this development when we're complying with everything, even though we're not at the subdivision process yet. We're just showing you what we're going to do. But complying with the subdivision process, we're not asking to not put Lake Ridge in when we're putting a lot next to it. We're 300 feet away from that. So I don't think that the city really has any reason to object to that. They've got more guarantee that Lakeview, Lake Ridge will go in on the RP and the proposed PC2 than you ever have on the Clark property. So, like I say, I guess I'm very disappointed in that representation. Okay, let's get to how can we move this forward. So, like I said earlier, last month, we'd originally talked about doing just a C2. So, but the city at that time, and that was before any of this staff was here, said, well, maybe we should go to PC2. So we said, how bad could that be? So we went ahead and did that. And so now if we can just kind of erase some of this stuff off the board as far as whether it's specifically a credit union or whatever, yeah, I'm all for that. Let's do that, move it forward. And then, like I say, with the infrastructure, we're going to do that. We're going to do the hardest part first, is that punching that Lakeview out to First Street. We've got a whole lot of utilities that need to be lowered. That's going to open it up, so it's going to be a lot less expensive to go the rest of the way, okay? And without getting too far into the weeds on the RP, because we're working on that, but we're not ready to bring that forward, and I don't want to be discussing that yet. But the extension of Lake Ridge, the dealing with the, oh, by the way, there, as part of the RP approval in '94, there was included actually in that packet that's recorded was the DOT approval of a Type B entrance kind of towards the northwest of that property on First Street. And that was, again, reconstructed when West First Street was reconstructed in early 2000s. A Type B entrance handles between 20 and 150 vehicles per hour. So that's basically the same as a city street, but it's a private drive. Okay, so that is taken care of. And then in our traffic study that went along with this, we talk about improvements as far as we're going to have 3 lanes coming up to First Street with a left turn, and I believe, from memory, I think we're putting a right turn deceleration lane on First Street on the south side there too. But I need to double check that. Yeah, and then the wetlands, excuse me, we actually have approval to mitigate that at the Wetland Mitigation Bank down by LaPorte City. That approval goes through 2022 unless we renew it. Let's see what else. DOT, wetlands. Yeah, I think that covers most of it. So I think we're close. I think tonight we're setting the date for public hearing. So I guess I would ask with that motion, if there's anything, like I say, we'll change and wipe the specific uses off the plan. And we've done the sidewalk. And if there's anything you need further in the design guidelines, that's fine. But we don't need the extra leverage on Lake Ridge. So with that, I'd be happy to try and answer any questions.
So back up to the DOT access.
Yes, sir.
Have you had any discussions? I mean, because is that, you know, if that's.
Is it still valid?
What's that?
Is it still valid? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want to clarify that. The DOT we always send our technical review packets to the DOT, and they send back comments. And the comment from the DOT is they will need to get permission for the access points and get the actual access permits from the DOT for those access points.
Right, and that may be tied to, we did have another client that was, or prospective client that was looking at the west side, and we did have communications with the DOT about moving that existing entrance halfway back to Lake Ridge, and we never actually made an official application for that, but we had some communication, so I'm not sure if that's what they were talking about.
I think the point is there hasn't been any recent conversations with the DOT about
Sure.
this development
Sure.
and the access points and what newly is proposed, something from a previous plan that showed different kinds of development and
Actually, no, the RP plan was what the DOT was given in 1994. That was part of the application to them. So that is still valid.
I think we're talking about both access points, though, right? For this PC2 area as well. Have you had conversations with?
Yes, we have, but there again, we've sent them basically what we were planning to do based on our traffic study, but we have not. Obviously, if we can't get through PC2 zoning, we're not going to talk to the DOT about putting a street entrance there. But there again, There was originally, when West First was going to be reconstructed, there was going to be like a 10-foot retaining wall there. The developer at the time, the owner at the time, negotiated with the DOT simply because that street was going to go through. But utilities, were put in at grade or whatever, so we don't have a retaining wall to remove, but we still got to lower utilities.
Okay.
Yeah, like I say, this has been going on for a while.
Any other questions for Wendell?
Yeah, I sort of have a question. So is Lake Ridge Drive, it'll be connected in Phase 1 to Whitetail, right?
That's correct.
But why would we expect you to extend it when it'll just turn into a dead-end street?
So I want to clarify that particular item. If you would put that slide back up there, or maybe we show the slide that
slide.
Tom's got on the screen.
That's it.
So this is exactly what we were talking about and why we passed that subdivision code amendment. Every development is responsible for extending the streets to the property boundary. And the issue is that what we have found in the community is that a phasing plan needs to be submitted that ensures that that street will get connected if it's going to be done in phases. If it's going to be done all in one phase, then it's not a concern. But we've had a number of developments, as you know, that they leave the last piece and there's very little development potential in the last piece, so there's no incentive for them to ever extend that road. So that's what we're talking about here, is the obligation of this developer to extend the road to that in that critical street connection piece. We want to ensure that the phasing plan that they're proposing here is going to be adequate to ensure that that gets extended. Now, if Mr. Clark to the south decides to come in with a development plan for his property, he will have to extend the street to the north property bound, Lake Ridge Drive, to his property boundary. But if Lake Ridge Drive never gets extended beyond Whitetail Drive, because there's not enough development in phase 2 of this development, then you've got a gap for a really long time. And that's happened in other parts of the community, and that's what there's been so much concern about expressed by community members, and that's one of the reasons that you just recommended to council that we amend the subdivision code. So we're looking at those things up front and looking at them carefully to judge at this point in time whether what's being proposed is going to have a reasonable chance of making sure that that critical street is connected, so that the next person to the south can take that dead end and then they extend it when they come in for development as well. So, everybody has to extend the streets to their property boundaries with the subdivision. The other thing I'd like to clarify is that the agreements that Mr. Lupkis is talking about that happened previously was about the right-of-way. There was never any agreement on the part of the city to actually construct the road. So I want to make that clear.
Well, actually what was in the agreement was if the city determined that it was necessary, the developer would dedicate the right-of-way and waive any objection to an assessment. So they basically, said, okay, if there's a problem, you can put it in the street and bill me for it. So, but see, that's why, different than any other, and I know a little bit about what happened before, but different than that is the city has an avenue, no pun intended, that they can put this street in if needed without any legal objection, that sort of thing. It's not the desired method, but it's far and above what you've got with Clark. So, and it is going to go in because if you look at the RP, and like I say, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on the RP, but as part of the RP, the access to Lakeview, used to be Lakeview, now it's Lake Ridge, is at the very southeast of the RP. So that would cause it to be extended all the way to the south property line. So, and we are going forward with that, but like I say, we can't pull the curtain back on that yet.
So, yes, the city has some legal ability to assess for street connections, but only some limited ability to do that, and it is certainly not the method we want to use when development is occurring. The method, according to state law, according to local law, is that when development occurs, when development's brought in, the streets are the extension of the streets are the responsibility of the developer of that development, and it shouldn't be left for the public taxpayers to foot that bill at some point, unknown point in the future. That's, I know that's a possibility, but certainly there's not perhaps even enough ability to assess the entire cost. So that is not what is required by Cedar Falls City Code.
Well, and I'll remind the commission also that at the last meeting, I explained to you that Cedar Crest Second Edition was platted with actually that street of right-of-way was dedicated to the city. And the city, did they preserve that? No, they sold that, they vacated it, sold it, and it was replatted into lots as recently as 2006 in Pheasant Hollow Third Edition. So I kind of question the validity of how crucial that development is. It will become crucial to both the RP and the PC2 once those happen, but the connection before, the evidence of the history isn't there, so.
Any other questions for Wendell?
So, Wendell, one of the other objections noted in the staff report is, or concerns is the convenience store location. How?
Yeah, if we're wiping all the uses off,
You're
yeah.
good, you're good with kind of taking,
yeah, I don't,
I mean,
that's the real estate broker's problem, then I really don't care.
right, well, because I just know that even though I understand it's the same owner,
From the-
on the property.
Sure, sure, let
When
me
you have
explain
residential
that.
by that convenience store,
Yeah, yeah.
that's always gonna,
So just
We've
to
seen a lot of
clarify,
flashes
staff
about
is
that.
not suggesting that there's no direction
Yeah.
on this plan. Staff is suggesting that those particular, the sites that are up against the residential, there be something either on the plan or in their guidelines that identifies those lots as
the
lower
types of
intensity
use
lots.
and then types of use and then the design guidelines that go along with that.
Right, right.
Right.
And you're good with that concept.
Yeah, let somebody else deal with that, I don't care.
Wendell, one question for you for scheduling. This is a long-term plan, obviously. We're setting the public hearing date tonight. I assume that we have time to work out some of these things if that's the case.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us is the conditioning of Lake Ridge, taking that lot out of the first phase. And like I say, we don't know exactly yet. We're not bringing a plat forward, but that's probably, I'd say conservatively, $750,000. And the fact that the RP plan is not yet in front of you, but it's going forward because that's actually the area of expertise that the owner has. Just an aside too, I think starting next week, we're gonna do an updated delineation. So then we'll have that all current. Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest heartburn that we have right now because, we're gonna have a lot of money up front, putting that road through, out to First Street. And, if you can't make it pay, it's not gonna happen, so.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to this item?
No one in Zoom.
All right, with that, we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion. Again, this item is for discussion and setting a public hearing date, and the recommendation is denial by the staff.
So can we clarify you're recommending denial of setting the public hearing date or recommend, or not, or are you recommending a denial at the public hearing on this?
So what we're basically saying is we're recommending denial of what we have before us right now. We would like the opportunity and we'd like some direction from the commission to address some of these issues that remain unresolved. We don't feel it is at the point where is something that to put the responsibility on the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider documents that are inconsistent with each other. That really shouldn't be something we're asking you to do. So we're asking the commission to, either defer this until we can get some of these issues resolved and give some direction on which issues you think should be resolved to the applicant, and then we can decide at that point when that public hearing should be set, for example.
Okay, yeah, 'cause that's my biggest concern. I mean, hearing everything and looking at everything we've got here, I don't feel real comfortable about making a decision to move this forward to a public hearing. We got a lot of concerns in the city. We've just talked about a lot of changes to the plans already. I'd like to see a little bit more of that cleaned up in the document before I actually take action on it.
Right,
I
right.
mean,
I would love to get, after the discussion that we had last month, have you, if you want to put it in a motion or whatever, okay, what do you want to do about that Lot 7? Do we need to do that in order to incentivize Lake Ridge? Is that a stumbling block for you guys? It is for us. The generality, do we peel back the specificity of the uses back to something more general, which then will make it
right.
dovetail with the guidelines?
Right, so I guess, Wendell, what I'd like to see is do a little updating on this is just me, I don't know what the rest of the people feel, but I would rather see you go back, do some more updating on this based on the discussions we've been having, clean up the document so there's less questions on people's mind, and bring it back, because I think the RP, I think it should be simpler, so, because we have no idea what's going on these
Well,
properties,
right,
right, in
but
reality. And so, if you could bring that back and get a lot of that ambiguity cleaned up, I mean, the big issue is gonna be that road, I mean, because that's the big dollar item, right?
Well, right, but,
And I don't know exactly how I feel about that, but but I do know, I mean, as Karen has stated, I mean, the city's gotten in a big pickle here with, we've been pretty accommodating on not getting those roads in at times, and it's come back to haunt us, over there by the school, et cetera, right now. And, I know it's a huge, huge investment for the developer to have to deal with that road, but, that's going to be kind of the breaking point in this thing, how we figure out how to deal with that, because.
well, and my earliest conversation with the city, and like I say, this predates any of this staff, I said, this is going to be the breaking point. It's been, like I say, I've been doing this for 25 years with this piece of property, and I can tell you there's probably been a half a dozen times that's what dropped it. So we've got, like I say, there are documents in place that if the city wants to, they could decide we're going to put that road in tomorrow. You'd have to get the money, but you'd get it right back. I don't know what else we can do, but I'd hate to see this thing die again. That's all I can say.
So I think generally, the planning piece of it, I don't have any significant problems with. I mean, it's generally, to the point though that if it was, simpler and we just have the overall guidelines, I think that's much better, because, I mean, you're throwing stuff out there that
Right.
the likelihood of any of it actually happening is probably pretty remote. In that form, it'll be something else, right? So why put that much specificity in there too?
That's what the PC2 guidelines are. I mean,
Yeah.
so if we want to back away from that a little bit, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, so I feel good about kind of taking that approach, because, there's going to be it'll probably be many different proposals over time that will come as that land develops. So, I mean, I like to see that cleaned up before we take any action moving it forward, and then maybe give you guys some time to hash out, that road issue, because that's a tough one. I don't know what the answer to that is.
It's probably above my pay grade. But the more
above mine.
specificity you can give me as far as what you're going to approve, as far as guidelines versus plan versus this, because obviously, I didn't think we were that far apart. I would have expected maybe a recommend for approval with these conditions.
So I guess, yeah. The only problem is with that, Wendell, is if, there's so many different pieces that need to be edited or updated, that gets to be difficult. It's easier if you bring back a cleaner document, I think, to the,
We've been at this a while already.
well, I know you have, and obviously, and there's been, I'm looking at it, there's a ton of work that's gone into planning and all these ideas. I mean, I'm fully aware of the, and I look at it and I was like, I wish you wouldn't have had that much work into it, because I don't think it's,
Me too, because I'm not going to collect.
but that's water over the bridge. I mean, I think the thing is, that those descriptions need to become more consistent and clarified, and it can be simpler without all the drawing and that type of thing to give us some guidance on the actual use of the property. I think, to me, that's not highly controversial. I think that's just a matter of a little, kind of redoing some more of that, bringing it back to us. I wouldn't have a problem, like I said, with that generically, but, and then it just comes down to the kind of the road issue. That's going to be the big deal.
Let's leave that Lot 7 piece out of it for just a minute, because it seems like there's largely some consensus on clarifying some of the inconsistencies with the guidelines and the plan and whatnot. I guess I'd be curious, and this could be a staff question or an engineer question, how much time is needed to clean up that stuff to the point where, where it's a tidy proposal? Just the language on the design guidelines and clearing the specifics on the plan.
We've been asking for that clarity for some time now, so it's up to the developer to clean up the documents, I guess, basically make them consistent, which has been a continuous comment and concern of staff for some time.
Yeah, well, like I say, if we back off the specificity, which apparently seems to be a lot of the problem. I mean, we're talking about lighting, for God's sake. These are issues that are site-specific. So, yeah, we can't make you happy if you want us to give you the details of every site and all that sort of stuff. So we'll peel back the drawings and give you as specific guidelines as we can live with.
Okay, thank you, Wendell.
That's a question I had, because it seems like we're not communicating here. PC2 is asking for a lot more detail than what you have given, and yet now we're saying make it more general. So I'm confused myself. What is it that the city wants from this developer?
So similar to, for example, Pinnacle Prairie, which I think is where maybe the design guidelines were kind of borrowed from some of those planning efforts. It is not possible, unless this is a master development and they're developing all the lots so they know very specifically what they're planning to build. So, and this developer is not doing that. And so sometimes when we have planned developments come in, similar to this one or similar to Pinnacle Prairie, where there's going to be multiple different parties developing the properties, we have consistently said, and this was exactly what we told them from the very beginning, and exactly what we have worked with Pinnacle Prairie, is that they show generally where the land uses go, and then have a set of design guidelines that then will create a process for reviewing individual development plans when they come in. But what we've continued to say is you can't have something drawn in an illustration that's inconsistent with your design guidelines. So they either have to make their drawing consistent with their guidelines, or we would be accepting of peeling back and not showing the building footprints in the parking lot, because we know they're not, unless this developer is actually planning to build those, they don't know exactly what's going to be brought forward. So similar to Pinnacle Prairie, we are accepting of saying, okay, generally these are the land uses that are going to go on these are the lots we're going to develop, and these are the land uses, these are the streets, and these are the design guidelines, and that's going to control when we have individual developments that come in. So we have been consistently talking to the development team about making sure that those are consistent, and we've been frustrated that we continue to have the same set of documents brought back to us, so that's what we would like to see, and I think something reasonable to address the speculative nature of this type of development.
Okay, so when you say you want to know what the design guidelines are, give me 3 examples of the design guidelines that would be in this.
So I think what they have in their design guidelines is on the right track. What they're talking about is consistent with what the intent of the PC2 zone, which is about creating cohesive developments where you're planning out your, that it's all one development and you can walk from one destination to another, and it's all, the buildings are similarly designed, similar materials. I think they have a lot of those elements in their design guidelines. It's just that the plan they're showing shows building footprints in the middle of the lot and parking surrounding it, which is completely opposite of what they've stated in their design guidelines. So what we're saying is you really can't have something that's internally inconsistent.
So scrap the drawings, right? There you go. Makes it easy.
Delete, delete, delete.
So I'm thinking out loud here.
Does anyone have any questions for Wendell before we?
Okay, go ahead.
Any other questions for Wendell while he's standing up here?
I think the one thing, you were asking for specificity on what we'd like to see for the next round, if we go to the next round. I would like to see the conversation with IDOT and just make sure that the access is above board.
Yeah.
So that would be one of my requirements.
Okay.
Thank you, Wendell.
Depending on how long it takes to clean up some of those details, I guess, and to give staff time to not have to rush through it prior to a set hearing date per se, I guess I move to defer the setting of the hearing to the next meeting.
Second.
All right, any discussion?
That still leaves the elephant in the room being that Lot 7, but I think if we can get it down to where that's the main topic of conversation, it'll be a lot more effective.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think that's a good motion. I do have a question that I'd like to address before we vote on that. It seems to me that there's always a developer, trust me, I'm going to do this, and the city wants to have some assurance, right, that that's going to happen. So one approach is to do with the phasing, right? But couldn't we just spell out in the development agreement that this road is going to get extended at a certain period of time? Can't we put some time frames on it to say, listen, this needs to happen in a certain period of time, whether it's in phase 1 or phase 2?
By a certain date or?
Yeah, yeah. Is that a bad idea? I'm looking for win-wins here.
I think it's open, I mean, it certainly is something that could be discussed. I'm not sure if the developer would be willing to determine that timeline, and then we've suggested that on other developments, and then that's been a no-go on the developer side because they don't have a real certainty of how quickly things will develop. So I
If
guess
that's the
more of a
case-
question for, the developer, I guess.
If that's the case, we're going to err on the safe side for the city then.
Actually, surprisingly, I suggested that early on to do basically like we do with sidewalks. Okay, you've got X amount of it that you haven't put in, you have X number of years to do it, blah, blah, blah. I have a feeling that that's probably going to be, he probably won't sign that until we are a little more firm on the RP, because quite honestly, the right hand and the left hand here. But I foresee that as a reasonable way to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not my money, so.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second to defer this. Any other comments? I guess my last one would be, let's, it seemed like there's a communication gap here, so let's get together and work some of this stuff out. So, all right, with that, roll call vote.
Okay. Holst,
Aye.
Larson,
I
Leeper,
Aye.
Lynch, Prideaux,
Aye.
Saul,
Aye.
Schrod,
Aye.
Sears.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes, and we will discuss it at a later date. That concludes our old business. New business, we have a College Hill site plan review for 2415 Franklin Street. And JD, I think you're introduced. Welcome back, by the way.
One second. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is the second item for the first new item on this agenda. It's a College Hill Neighborhood Overlay District Site Plan Review for 2415 Franklin Street. As you may see on the screen, this is a,
Need to catch the screen up too.
yeah, just a second, I think.
Mike, do you have the?
Oh,
There we go.
There you go. Thank you. So as you can see on the screen, this property is in R2 Residence Zoning District, and the blue line also indicates it's in a College Hill Neighborhood Overlay Zoning District. The applicant is trying to propose site improvements to this property, and as part of College Hill Neighborhood Overlay Zoning District, such kind of improvements is considered as a substantial improvement, and which needs direction from Planning and Zoning and City Council approval prior to doing any site activities. So as you can see on the screen, these are some of the existing conditions on site. So they have gravel areas in the required front and side yard, and the off-street parking currently is being done over the gravel surfaces. As per section 11179, the rental paving code suggests that off-street parking needs to be done on paved surface and not on gravel. And as per section 26181, such kind of site improvements that includes adding parking areas or improving any making any site improvements for parking requires review by P&Z and City Council. So here is the proposal by the applicant. The proposal includes removal of all the existing gravel areas in the required front and the side yard and seed it back with the grass. Removal of existing paved access point from Franklin Street and recurve back, and adding a parking area or parking pad, which is about 20 feet by 36 feet, accommodating 4 stalls behind the house, and adding a landscaping screening around the proposed parking area to set a buffer, and also adding a 4 feet wide sidewalk from the parking area to the house. So those are the things or the improvements that the applicant is willing to make. As per code, the required parking space is 8 feet by 18 feet. So we feel that this is a sizable area of paved surface. And also as per landscaping code, they would be meeting the parking screening requirements as per the intent of the district. And such parking space behind the house are also encouraged with the neighborhood character of College Hill Overlay Zoning District. So those are the improvements that the applicant would like to make. So the Community Development Department recommends approval of the submitted design review application to include new parking area and make site improvements as we saw for 2415 Franklin Street property. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I want to add one more thing, is we did receive one of the neighbors' email. He was trying to address that previously some of the rental properties in this neighborhood have paved area from the back, and the tenants never parked from the back. They used to park on the street, so that was one of the concerns that was raised by one of the neighbor of this in this neighborhood. So it's more likely the applicant's choice to tell the tenants to park from the back and not on the street. Also, I would like to mention that Todd and Darren, who are the applicants, are online, so they may answer any question that the commission has. Thank you.
All right, thank you, JD. Is there anyone from the applicant that would like to add anything to that before we have conversation? We have a hand raised by Todd there.
You should be able to tell.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yeah, we just wanted to say thanks to JD for helping us navigate the process and to move forward with all the required permits. He's been a great representative of Cedar Falls, and just thanks to him for his help. And we'll answer any questions if you have any.
All right, does anyone have any questions for Todd?
How many bedrooms are in the rental? And does this comply with the College Hill parking requirements per bedrooms?
Yes, there are 4 bedrooms on the property. As part of rental application process, group rental committee has already reviewed this application, and this was one of the stipulation to make the parking improvements and suggested landscaping improvements to the site, restoring all the gravel areas, like taking all gravel areas off and seed it back with grass. That was part of the requirement. With that in mind, I think for 4 tenants, there is sufficient parking with this new proposed plan. So that was just part of the process.
Thank you, JD.
Thank you.
Also, is that alley paved or is it gravel?
I think it's gravel.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to this item?
There's no one else on Zoom.
No one else is paying attention tonight, so opening it back to the commission.
Looks like a nice improvement.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice.
I've moved to approve.
Second?
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, let's do a vote.
Holst,
Aye.
Larson,
Aye.
Leeper,
Aye.
Prideaux,
Aye.
Saul,
Aye.
Schrod,
Aye.
Sears.
Aye.
All right, that item will move on to council. Thank you. Nice job, JD. Any commission updates?
I don't have anything for you tonight, but I do want to just address your comment at the beginning of the meeting. I think we don't yet know, based on the governor's proclamation, she did extend the proclamation that she had on till the end of August, I believe. Correct, Julie? And we're still assessing the implications of what she had said. So we may be continuing some hybrid meetings still in August at least.
Okay, I assume we'll have more and more people joining online for other reasons, even if we don't, probably, so remotely. All right, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.